trying to distill items to their core to make something that's otherwise very overwhelming much more manageable. So let's start with the purpose and components. So there are really only three kind of objectives or overall purpose for the APR. The first one relates to accountability. So this piece is really focused on overall high level components of what within the grant is actually being achieved. The second piece is focused on learning and adaptability. So if you're in the grant space for any length of time, you know that grants do not live in a vacuum. They live in the real world, and that your project is also existing in the real world. And so what you proposed may not always actually uh, realize in terms of practice in the real world. So how are you learning? How are you adapting to what's occurring? And then the final piece is really in regards to what are you going to do next? What's coming up? What's on deck? And what's really nice is that when you think about the APR and thinking about just various different funding sources as well, what they're asking you within that APR really maps onto these three objectives or these purposes. So what they ask you usually in the APR is going to be something around, what did you say you were going to do? And so in this question, they say, what did you propose? What's in your proposal? Or what did you say in the previous APR? And then they're going to ask questions that are related to what happened and why. So what are your accomplishments, challenges, and changes? So what are you learning and how are you adapting? And then finally, there's going to be questions about, so what are you going to be doing in the upcoming year? What are the next steps? What are the course corrections? So let me walk through a couple of examples, pulling out just portions of an APR to try to highlight how these three questions may actually emerge. So let's first look at the National Science Foundation. So some of the questions that will be asked of you from the National Science Foundation will be, what are your major projects of the major goals of the project? What was being accomplished under these goals, in terms of your activities, your opportunities, and then also, then what are your next steps? So if you look at the major goals, again, what did you say you were going to do, that first piece? And then what did you do? What happened? What did you learn? And then that final piece is in regards to those next steps. A similar pattern also emerges when we start looking at the Department of Education. So we look at their APR and you're asked to talk about, what changes do you want to make? Are there going to be changes in the next year? And sometimes those changes are to the activities, and sometimes those changes will be to the budget itself. Then there are questions that are related to your partnerships. Is this a cooperative agreement or not? Those are all things that are really settled during the proposal phase. So what did you say you were going, what did you propose or say you were going to do? Then what happened is the last piece. And the last piece of what's asked on this page. I should say, just for NSF and for DOE, the Department of Education, in both examples, I'm just really pulling out a page from the APR to really highlight how those questions map onto, how those components of the APR map onto the questions that map onto that overall objective. And then finally, for individuals who are in the philanthropic space, very similar type of pattern also happens as well. When you're asking about the activities, what have you done? When you're asking about what your proposed work, what happened, and then what are you doing in terms of the next steps. So that just gives you kind of an overall kind of flavor about how those questions really help in terms of thinking about condensing down what you need to be able to put into your APR. So let me take a moment here and pause and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, we do have a question in queue. Can you share more about what it takes to shift our mindsets from treating reporting as more than just a compliance tool and as a strategic tool?
Okay. It's interesting because one of the, if you come to the webinars often enough, you'll start seeing where I'm very often talking about mindset because mindset plays such an important role in everything that we're doing, particularly in the grant space. You know, these grants are things that we all hold very near and dear to us. We really want them to do well. And how we approach that and the mindset that we take is really important to be able to either approach the work or if we're pulling away from the work. So I think one of the things that helps in terms of the mindset is one in terms of the type of culture that you create within your team. Um, Reminding yourselves to reframe things. To reframe things as learning, that you're constantly learning. And I think that's one of the benefits of APRs having that learning and adaptability question is that it helps you to make sure you're focusing on the learning and you're trying and you're experimenting to see what's working and what's not working. So I think that that's one of the things that you need to do. And something that we say at the Rucks Group often is that you also just need to give yourself some grace. I worked with someone who was on the team. She's since retired, and she used to kind of joke and say that writing a proposal was like writing fiction. And we know it really isn't writing fiction. But her point was there's so many theoretical parts of writing a proposal, so many things that you don't know, black swans that can actually happen that you really have to learn how to adjust. So you have to give yourself a lot of mercy within that process.